Hello there, YouTubers, and welcome to King's Court. I am Shrine King, and today we're doing a review of Ancestors Legacy. So this is more for like, is it worth it? What did I think of it? What did I note of it? And maybe some information about it as I'm playing it. So, the nice bit is this game was actually, it's got a period where it's free to play, and then which actually ends, I believe, today, which is December 2nd. So that was kind of nice that they allowed you to play for free, but at the same time, they also did a sale on the game, so it was like half off. And it turns out if you had some of their other games, it actually would give you, there's a bundle pack that they said for like, I think Men of War. And that would actually get you a bigger discount if you already had it. So rather than it being 50% off, it turned out to be 60% off. Now, what is the game? This is a squad-based real-time strategy game. Other games that are similar to it is like Men of Honor, Men of War. There is the Warhammer series Dawn of War, right? All of those are basically the same thing, where the objective is to take control points that give you more resources, and as you get more resources, you can buy more squads or upgrade, enhance, build buildings, so on and so forth. So as you can see in this game, this is more into, I want to say, like the medieval era. So you'll see that there's like Anglo-Saxons, there's Vikings, there's Germans. There's only 4 races. I'm sorry, not races. 4 nations that you play as, and you'll see like right on the beginning you basically have 1 unit plus a leader. Now, one thing I did find kind of interesting with this game is that if your leader dies, you don't have a way to get back your leader. So it is kind of a crippling effect if your leader dies. Now that said, the leader isn't like massive damage or anything like that, but they definitely can help. They can turn the tide, especially in one-on-one combat or just a small squad. So, key selling points to the game is it sounds great. The strategy model is simplistic, yet it has enough challenges to make the strategy of it pretty interesting, such as deploying traps that can actually get your enemy walking into it, and then use that to your advantage to charge against your opponent, and then turn a tide of war. The other parts too is that you bear in mind with the squad base here, you'll see like my squad was a little hurt, and you're actually able to replenish your troops. They made it a lot simpler, so it's basically, hey, you can just get them there, and then there's a easy button to tell it to replenish. The other part too that I thought was really interesting, I really like here, is that when your units take damage, it isn't necessarily, oh, here you only have so many hit points, and then they're dead. They actually can take like wounds and stuff like that and be wounded, and then you can tell them to make a healing camp, and they'll actually heal themselves up. Even your leader, or hero, or whatever you want to call it, the same thing. So this is pretty interesting so far. Now, I mean, this is kind of early, I believe. I don't think it's really a full release of the game, but it very well may be. I do know that there's a lot of expected stuff coming in, right? So like you can actually get it to where, or I'm sorry, they're probably going to introduce more nations and different units and probably other elements to build on the strategy. So you'll notice here too, like even at night, the fog actually increases. It makes it harder to see. So only the light of the buildings and stuff like that are really giving you any kind of vision. The other part too was that they actually had a quick button to allow you to retreat your units, which is really nice because you didn't have to like go click, tell them to like, hey, go back. You actually tell them to retreat, and they'll just fall back to a certain point. And that also gives an interesting strategy too, because like you saw there, their leader was fighting my slingers. I had retreated my leader, and I was actually able to tell my leader to come back, and they get a charge bonus, and that helps break morale. And morale does exist in this. So the more that you're the more units that you have against your opponent, if you're flanking, I'm sure there's even more elements to it. I mean, and again, I'm relatively new to this. This is kind of like a first impression overall video. But I'm sure there's more elements that would actually help break morale of the troops. The other thing is too, when you're purchasing your troops, you actually would want to look. They tell you if they have good morale or bad morale. Usually they'll tell you if they have, like, you know, good offense or really good defense. And that's the part that actually kind of makes this interesting. So they do have counter units. So, like, you know, your ranged cavalry is a huge problem for them. Anyone who can close the distance really quick. So, like, interesting enough, like the Vikings, they have berserkers. The berserkers can actually throw axes, so that way it already hurts the archers, and then they still continue their charge in, and they're fast, so they'll most likely run right into the archers and probably tear them apart. Because then on top of that, right, if you have frenzy, you can pop frenzy, and then all of a sudden they become super strong. Which is not really super strong. They just become more aggressive. So that way, with the axes and stuff like that, they are actually a little bit deadlier. So, if you're looking at the mini-map there, you're going to see that B was just blinking. That's to let me know that, hey, someone's doing something at B, which means my opponent is actually trying to take B. Now that said, I've already taken D, and the purpose of this game is really to kind of push for those objective points. The more objective points that you can take and set up defenses, you actually will generate more resources. Which in this game, there's technically 4 resources in this game. There is wood, food, iron, and then there is housing. Now, housing is not necessarily a resource you capture. That's something that you have to build, so that's to be able to support infantry. Now, because it's squad based, the other part I like is that they kind of kept it a little simplistic in saying, hey, you don't have like 50 guys, you don't have hundreds of people, you don't have thousands of people, you have 10 squads. That's the max that you get, which, by the way, your leader is 1. So bear in mind though, if you lose your leader, that means you get a whole other squad, right? So you'll see in the bottom right though, like the other part that I thought was really interesting is so many of these kind of games, I'm so used to having to go back to the base, pick out the building, and know which building it is, by the way, and then be like, oh, I need this unit, I need that unit, and then most likely have to go through an upgrade menu and all that kind of crap. What I really like here, and this is a huge pro to this game, and bravo to them, like honestly, they have a quick bar menu, and when you click on that quick bar menu, which is, you'll see here, I got like like the unit itself has its abilities, and then right above that there's like a guy who looks like he's enraged, and there's some buildings, and there's just a house, and then there's like a gear, which the gear is supposed to be like kind of like the science, it's upgrades, right? And then you have the cross, which is actually like religious buffs and stuff like that. Very interesting stuff altogether. And the nice part is that you can click on that and you can quickly go through and be like, you know what, I want to build another house, and I want to build this, and I want to build that, and I want to upgrade that. I need to research this, right? Now, the cool part about this too is that when you pick a building, you don't actually have to place the building. It automatically has a set. So what they did here in this game is they focused more about your troops, your combat, the fighting, the action, rather than being very focused or stuck on trying to make sure you put a building in the right place, the best place that it could be, so on and so forth. Now, with that said, one thing I will point out is when you capture a base, or I'm sorry, when you capture an objective point, and you go to build a watchtower, and you know your opponent is in certain directions, maybe they're up to the north, maybe to the east, you want to pay attention to which watchtower placement is coming up when you go to place it. So as you pick it, there's watchtower 1, 2, and 3, and usually there's one to the west of it, one to the east of it, and one to the north of it. So basically a triangle of defenses. But they don't necessarily fit that all the time. So here you'll see right there. So like in this one, it's north, west, and south. Those are the 3 key points that the watchtowers can build at. So you want to pay attention a little bit to that to make sure that you put your watchtower in the direction that your opponent's going. So to kind of cut to the chase here, I really am enjoying this game. I really like where they went with it. I like that it's more combat focused. I like that they went to something that is slightly complicated but is still simplistic. So I know, hey, I'm gonna get into combat. I'm trying to do certain break maneuvers. I most likely need to use some skills really quick. in particular skills. I know that I can hurt my own units with archers, especially if they're into combat, but it's not necessarily always a bad thing if your units are better defended against ranged than your opponent. Having it to where I know I have a quick button to tell them to retreat, to actually be able to place traps. I mean, all of this stuff is really key and interesting. Now, what I will say is that there's like a Z option or Z key option. What it does is it brings your guys in. I also like right there, you'll see as your troops are killing and getting more experience in combat, they actually gain levels. And as they gain those levels, you can actually buff them up in a certain way. You can choose, hey, I want them to be more offensive. You can be like, hey, I just want them to be faster. I need them to get around more. You can even say, hey, you know what, I want them to have better defense, so that way they're able to hold off or take more damage, so on and so forth. So, very cool stuff. I didn't really get into, or get to the point of trying to play it solo. I'm sorry, not solo, I'm sorry, multiplayer. But I do know the gist of that is usually there's people who are really good at this stuff. And I did see that it looks like they want to, you can actually tell it by level. So as the people are playing those races or nations, they'll actually start gaining experience, and as they gain that experience, it'll start to level them up. So you can actually tell it like, hey, I don't want to fight someone who's level 8, who's already been so far into this game that I don't even have a chance. You can actually pick out, like, kind of limit down who it is that you're trying to fight. Now bear in mind, if you do that and there's no one that's, you know, trying to do multiplayer that is in that range, you might have to open it up a little bit. What I will say is, starting out not really knowing too much about the game, the first fight going against easy AI was a little rough. It was very competitive. As I kind of figured out the gimmicks to the game and how to, you know, what builds what resources are coming in, how to capture, how to build all the units, how to upgrade the units, and so on and so forth. Once I kind of figured all of that out, everything really changed for me. So that, you know, going against the easy AI, I was really just dominating the field. Then I went against medium AI after I learned that, and I dominated exactly the same way, where essentially I just pushed over from, you know, going like in the same map. I went from my actual place to D to E, then I took C, then A, then B, and I was actually a little bit more rushing about it. So the parts there that make it kind of interesting, and it would be very interesting in online play, is that even though if you build all the watchtowers and stuff like that, your outposts are not so hard to take. So even with the guy having like 3 or 4 squads, he most likely can take it. So you have to make sure to defend those. You want to make sure that you are paying attention and capable of maneuvering your units. So you don't ever really want to move your units way too far away to be able to defend any location. So you want to make sure that you have some there. So overall, if I wanted to really rate this, so some of the stuff I gotta say, honestly, this was first impressions. I wanted to get the video out there and say that, hey, you know what, this really is interesting. I do like the game. I did find it fun. I didn't get into the campaign, and you'll see here, this is where I've kind of like taken over everything, so I kind of skipped a little bit farther ahead. So here I've taken over everything. I've got a lot of upgraded units, and I'm getting ready to probably take over their main base. So, what's the gist? I think it's good. I do know it has a story mode to it, a campaign. I didn't actually get into the campaign yet. I'm debating about actually making a video for the campaign to see how that actually plays out. But, I mean, still, it's really interesting just even on the skirmish side. So if you're looking for an RTS and you like squad based, right now I would say this is actually a pretty good one. It's definitely worth at least a view, right? Watch a couple videos, see what you think of the gameplay and the style. What I would like to see is I would like to see that they expand a little more. All right, there's currently 1, 2, 3 levels of technology. And there's certain units. I would like to see some more units come out, giving a little more mix-up in the combat. I would like to see the graphics increased, not necessarily specifically on the like the zoomed out side of it, but when you hit Z, it's supposed to come like zoom in and kind of show you a closer view of the combat. And mine already had it set on ultra, and it was still kind of like fuzzy when you get into that. Now for me, I look at Total War. Warhammer or Total War Thrones of Britannia, I look at that as kind of like the the pinnacle of what you're looking for. When you zoom into that one, honestly, the graphics look really, really nice. The level of detail on the people is really nice. Now, what I will say is, in that one, the combat moves don't look as realistic as it did in this one. And I'm not sure what they did differently, but it was really interesting. You can actually watch them. And it also gets pretty bloody and brutal, so that, like, I like that they had that kind of detail, but it wasn't like just, oh, here's a big blood splatter all on the ground, because usually, you know, even in the other, you know, like I mentioned, Total War, you're normally getting a mod that makes it more gory, and there's just blood everywhere. So, a lot of interesting aspects to this game. I definitely feel it's worth it. I feel the strategy side of it is pretty strong. I feel that the time-consuming side of it is pretty strong as well. And by that I mean it doesn't take forever to get through a match. I'm not going to go into a match and be like, hey, it's going to take like 50 minutes to an hour and a half to get through this. It's, you know, probably about 20 to 30 minutes. And honestly, if you get really good with the game and you're going against really good players, chances are it's only going to be about maybe 15 to 20 minutes to really turn that tide and determine the way that combat's going. So I like that it stays to that model and doesn't get kind of crazy or huge about it. Now, bear in mind, the more people, obviously, the little longer it's going to take. So I would say if you got a full game of like 6 people, chances are that's probably going to be like 40, 45 minutes, maybe 30 if it's like you really just pushed into the enemy and you're just conquering overall. So right there you can see that's the victory, and I was at like 24 minutes or something like that. That's with me kind of playing around, and like here I like where they kind of tell you here's how you did. You have the overall. It took me a while to get used to this part because it starts here, and then I was like, okay, where's the next button, right? And you actually have to click. Now bear in mind, if you say continue, it'll push off into the, like, move on to going back to the main screen, so you want to be careful about that. But game is great. I really look forward to the campaign. I did end up purchasing it. Like I said, right now, for me it was like $13 because I had the other game. It's $17 or $18 if you're getting it half off. Definitely, to me, I was like, that's really cheap considering, and it's really nice work that they've got so far. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out here in the future with patches and new modifications or even expansions. So, thanks again. Like, subscribe, let me know what your thoughts are, and I hope to see you in the game.